Welcome to Latchkey Legends. I'm Santanu Rahman. So today I have a very special guest, my first guest, who is Melissa Nicholson. I've known Melissa for a long time. She is a CEO for WorkMuse and an expert on work-life balance, which I think we could all use some advice on. Melissa, thank you for being on here.
I'm so honored to be your first guest.
So the whole point of this podcast was to get the voices of Generation X, our generation. And the reason why is my title is Recreation and Program Specialist at the Parks and Recs Department in Austin for senior programs. We call senior programs Varsity Generation. If you go on the City of Austin's website, seniors are defined as people age 50 and up. Well, we're in our 50s.
I know it. I don't feel like a senior, but I am level 50.
We are. Absolutely we are. And, you know, just kind of historically, we are kind of this sort of almost forgotten about, unseen, unthought about generation sometimes.
I think it's because we were latchkey kids.
Yeah, we were. I mean, I was. We were just talking about this. Like, both of my parents worked. So after I was done with school, I'd come home and I'd, have my key and open the door, make myself a snack, watch TV, hang out with my friends.
Totally.
So you're from Texas?
Yes, I grew up in San Marcos, just south of Austin.
So what was latchkey life like for you?
Well, my dad owned a used car lot. My mom had a preschool in San Marcos for like 150 kids. It was insane. And I would take the bus home, and I would just get myself let myself in, get myself a snack, sit down. I was a, first kid rule follower child. So I would like to get my homework out of the way because I wanted to just hang out and watch TV.
So you were a good kid.
Yeah. I was probably your typical first kid. My little brother was a stinker, and he would come home, and I would just try to get my stuff done before he got in and was causing trouble or whatever. But and so it was just your typical I was doing that. And I mean, I think that's how we all lived. It's the bus might drop you off a quarter mile away, and you were walking down the hill.
Right.
And I remember being chased by dogs and all kinds of stuff. And at those moments where you're like, somebody's breaking into the house. I feel like someone is at the front door. Someone's breaking into the house. You're calling your parents, and they're like, get in the laundry bin.
One of the other things Gen Xers talk about is also when it's time to come home is when the street lights would come on.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I mean, just before recording, we were talking about the fact that our life today is so different for our kids from where we were. And I don't even think, our parents, we would go out to play, and I would literally hit the backyard. We had woods behind our house. It was a very kind of woody area neighborhood anyway, with lots of property and land, and there were wild horses out there. We would ride those horses. Wow. We don't even know whose horses they were,
I imagine there were plenty of shenanigans at the river.
Oh, totally. Totally, and we were just on our own. It was the awesomest. It was the 80s. It was the 80s.
Yeah.
It was
absolutely.
Somebody would ride their bike to your house and knock on your door and be like, hey, let's go. And you're like, okay, we're going.
Absolutely. That was our mode of transportation. And that's where you would know where people were at, where you'd see a pile of bikes in someone's yard. It's like, oh, everyone's over there, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So growing up in the 80s, music, television, movies were such important cultural touchstones for us. What were some of yours in the grade school, junior high era for you?
Well, I mean, we definitely were going to the movies a lot with our friends, and I think also I had tons of slumber parties with my friends. There was a lot of hanging out. By the time I hit high school, I was thinking about it because my kids are teenagers. And man, their lives are just so different from mine. And I think, God, I need to like remember this when I'm like, I need to know about this or I need to know about that. I'm like, my parents knew nothing.
Yeah.
I was literally like 12 o'clock curfew. I was a good kid, but we were cruising around in other teens' cars. We were hitting the Taco Bell. You know, it was just like the best of being forgotten.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
But like still cared about by your parents, you know, like, I mean, there are things about it that also, like, as my kids are hitting this period, like, we're right in the middle. My daughter's a senior and she's graduating this year. And, like, the college process, like, man, it is just so much. And I think my parents were just, I felt very blessed, but my parents were like, okay, we can help you if you go in-state, public college.
Nice.
And I was like, okay, A&M or UT.
Yeah,
Like, it was like
yeah.
a two choice. I don't remember anybody helping me with an application.
Right.
I did not
right.
even, I did not, Santanu, I did not even get in the car to drive 40 minutes to see the UT campus to see if I liked the campus or 2 hours to A&M. My parents, there was no, it was sight unseen. I literally decided, because I worked at like the Lions Club tube rentals in the summers, and my friends who came back that year that had been freshmen at college, some of them went to A&M, some of them went to UT, and I like did a poll. Which one did you like?
Yeah, it was just a given that that's where you'd go, right?
Well, it was just like you weren't picking more than one or two schools.
Right.
And for most people, they were just staying in their hometown because it was so much less expensive.
Yeah.
And we had a big university right there.
Yeah,
So
and
most of my friends just stayed there.
It's so funny. I have almost the exact story growing up in Illinois.
Yeah.
In Champaign, Illinois, like it was pretty much a given you're going to go to the University of Illinois.
Right. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, you're right. Exactly.
What are you thinking? I remember going to my parents and being like, you know, and I ended up being a business major because I think also our generation, you felt like here, I don't know about your parents, but my parents were first time college students in their families. So like they came from Depression era parents, very poor. My mom was actually, her mom died when she was really young. So she kind of lived an orphan type life. She was raised by a bunch of different aunts through when she graduated high school, but they both put themselves through college, which you could back then, which you could. You could work your way through and you could get, you know, loans, government loans and all that kind of stuff. And you could do that. So I think in their heads, they were just like, any college is great. And I don't even remember like college counselors. There were no college visits. You didn't have people coming in to meet you from colleges. It wasn't like that. And so it's just an interesting, it's so different.
Things are different. And, you know, going back to kind of the cultural touchstones, do you remember the first movie that you saw in a movie theater with your friends without your parents?
Well, I definitely know the first date I had.
Okay. Well,
when I was in 8th grade.
Okay.
7th or 8th grade. I think I was in 8th grade and he was in 7th grade.
Did y'all go see a movie?
We went to go see Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Wait, the movie.
Yeah, that was the movie.
Oh,
Buffy the Vampire Slayer. That was
okay.
the movie we went to. So that was my first, like, my parents are dropping me off. I'm going on a date with a friend. I don't even remember the first movie that I went to with friends. Definitely I was doing it in junior high. I think I was doing it, which we called junior high, not middle school then. And I think I was also doing it in elementary school. I think our parents would just drop us off. Yeah, there were like 2 movie theaters in the town. So that was definitely a converging point for any kids.
Yeah.
On the weekend, you know, they wanted to go to the movie, go to the pizza place right before, then go to the movie theater.
Yeah.
And it was a drop-off situation.
Situation. Yeah. Yeah. But it still was a big deal because you weren't with your parents, you were with your friends. And,
yeah.
And my first one was Romancing the Stone.
That's awesome.
And then the second one was 16 Candles, which did not age very well.
Oh my God. And also think about this, like we really we were also the first generation where suddenly maybe around the time we were in high school, you could watch movies at home. Like you could go to the movie store and rent a movie. Such a big deal.
Right.
But you know, just talking about like being in community with people versus isolation and like renting it and just watching it at home or whatever. Usually you were doing that at a birthday party or something like that anyway.
Right.
But when you were in the movie theater, it was like, I mean, that is where everything was happening, you know? So like, I definitely remember seeing, I think E.T. is the first movie I remember going to and seeing with my parents. I'm
With your
sure
parents, yeah.
Like, I definitely remember standing in line. And there was like a huge line, and it was such a big deal.
Yeah.
And those kind of like movies like Star Wars and things like that. I remember being in the theater with my dad.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if it was Star Wars 2 or 3, but the one where Princess Leia, you don't know it's her, and she's walking up and Han Solo is frozen. And I remember my dad going, "That's a woman in that outfit. That's a woman." And I was like, "No, really?"
It's interesting. You were talking about videos, and I was thinking about just recently about Blockbuster videos, like all these video stores, even though
the local mom and pop video stores.
Here in Austin, it was all about I Love Video and Vulcan Video. Those are such iconic places. And even just talking about films with the people who work there.
For sure.
You know?
For sure. And with your friends, like making mixtapes.
Yeah.
Like we had tape players, you know? So it's like we're making mixtapes for each other. Like all the thought you put into like things for your friends and for your friend group. Like,
right.
You know?
Oh, yeah. It was kind of a reflection of who you were. And if they connected to it, then you're like, we're going to be best friends forever.
Totally. I mean, we didn't have texting.
Right.
So it's like, I made you a mixtape.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, we did have phones. So we did have phones, but remember, like, even we didn't have, like, at some point when I was in middle school or high school is when someone could call in on the other line. Before that, people couldn't even call in. It was just busy.
Yeah.
So I remember it was such a big deal in high school getting a phone line in my bedroom.
Oh, yeah, in your bedroom.
And then I could, and my parents probably did it more for themselves than for me. And I had to pay for part of it, but like they did it, I think, more for themselves because they would be like, get off the phone. But when it came time, like algebra, homework, like those things, they wanted me to do good in school, but they didn't want to get in there and like work on it with me. So they're like, let these teenagers work it out amongst themselves. But they didn't like the phone line being held up. So they're like, you know what? Okay, you're a junior or whatever.
Yeah.
Get your own phone line.
Yeah. So where were you in your life when the internet started becoming a thing? I
was in
use.
college, not of daily use, but I was in college. I was like a junior or a senior. I graduated in 92, and we chat rooms. Like people were into like, what's it? And I didn't even really get how it worked. And I was like, this guy is a model, and we're like, he's probably not a model. This is really weird. And you would have to dial up. You would have to dial up.
Yeah.
Even when I was a young adult and I had graduated from college and I was in Austin and I'd been here a couple of years. So maybe I was like 22, 23 and we were like out making our own little movies. My husband's a filmmaker and we met in acting class. We were friends for a long time. But we had a group of friends and we were making our own little movies, switching parts, switching roles, learning all the different things. And but we would like try to download things off the internet to watch, like movies that people had, and we would I would go to his apartment and we would sit there, hang out, and I like with friends and wait for an hour and a half to watch a 2-minute clip of something.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, I remember, when file sharing was first a thing, like with Napster and LimeWire and Kazaa and all those sites where it's like, oh yeah, I can download the entire album or download the entire movie. And so then some of my friends who are techies, they just had like so much pirated material.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I lived with one of those techies.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so then, one of the things that I think is interesting about our generation is that we are the only generation that has navigated both a non-digital world and a digital world, like at a young age, right?
Yeah.
We saw the transition and we lived through that. So while we are all sucked into technology right now, I would think Gen X would be pretty okay if it all kind of burned down and we had to go back to basics. It'd be hard, but we'd done it before.
Well, let me say, in one weird way, the pandemic was a little bit like that. And the other way, it threw us into technology with everybody universally learning how to Zoom. But in another way, because you were, especially during the period, I was just really thinking about this last week because we're on the 5-year anniversary of the pandemic and really like the lockdown period at that time. And when everything was so slow, like your life was your neighborhood, your life was your surroundings, and your home and your family right there, versus like the hustle and bustle and craziness of the life we had. But it's like, it's interesting to think about how many things popped up like in our neighborhood, and it would be dusk, and all of a sudden my neighbor across the street would come out in a fairy outfit and all these little kids, and there'd be a parade, and people were making scavenger hunts for the teenagers in the neighborhood where they could go to different posts and find the scavenger hunt and look in the neighborhood for something else, and people were getting really creative. I think that it's interesting having one foot in one world and another foot in the other world. We are so programmed as humans to forge forward no matter what. If you think of all that we have been, everybody now who lives on the earth, all that we have been through that pandemic, through all those experiences, it's like, it's crazy that it can be so far in the back of our minds somehow. But it's like, it's having one foot in both really, really can allow you to appreciate in that moment when we were in that time 5 years ago. It's like, the creativity and like, oh yeah, this is like when I have some, sometimes people didn't know if they had a job to return to, or maybe their business was shut down for a bit or whatnot, and we were all kind of like in pause mode. Well, it made you really think about like, those are some of the most creative moments that people had. You had a lot of people creating podcasts out of that moment.
Absolutely.
And getting together, like doing all these really creative things to find community in it. And I think that was a really good, that was like a silver lining thing for many of us, because our lives are so incredibly fast. And they're all about being better and achieving more and being like the perfect parent and the perfect partner and the perfect professional.
Let's go there. So we as humans are incredibly adaptable, and we as Gen Xers, I feel like we've had to adapt to quite a lot. So in some ways, I feel like we're sort of experts at adaptation. We just, it's what I call MacGyvering. Right? We just like give us a paper clip, some duct tape, and some chewed up gum, and we'll be able to make a radio out of that or something. You know what I mean? Like that adaptability is something that I feel like that's one of the strengths that perhaps future generations can grab from us.
We had to fix things. Like our parents' generation, we had to fix things. Like I remember I had this moment when my kids were younger, where we had our minivan, and our minivan, something had happened where the door fell off the hinge of the minivan. We were getting ready to go to the beach, and the kids were in the car. They were like, maybe they were like 6 and 8 or something like that. And everybody's like fussy, all this stuff. And we're like, me and my husband are literally holding up this thing, trying to like get the door back on the hinge and in the thing, just to get it to the mechanic, to get it like around the corner, to get it done. And I was just thinking at that moment, it was the most surreal moment in a long time. I had a friend pull up who came back from my filmmaking days from my 20s. And she lives a completely different lifestyle. Like, she is single. She lives in LA. She's a showrunner, has a thriving career in the film industry. And she pulled up because it turned out her friend was renting the house next door to us. And she's like, Melissa, Mike. And we're like, hey, Kat. And I was like putting a door back on a minivan. And I was like having this like quintessential parenting moment that couldn't be further apart. Like, oh my gosh, we live such different lives. but I also felt like an 80s parent.
Yeah.
Like
yeah,
I was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
this is what you'd be doing if you were an 80s parent.
Right.
It's that time like the car, something, the tire goes out. We didn't have AAA. We didn't even have a cell phone. We had to fix the tire. Our parents had to fix the tire, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like all those things, like something broke, you fix the broken thing. Something busted, you mended it.
Yeah.
You didn't just throw it in the trash
Exactly.
and get rid of it.
Right.
You know, that is the kind of thing I always kind of like call back into my childhood a little bit, where I'm like, no, you know, I can repair this thing.
Right.
There's no reason for me to stick it in a landfill.
Totally. So you mentioned parenting, and you know, not all Gen Xers decide to take on that life
For
of
sure.
becoming a parent. And all that sort of stuff. But you and I did, and our kids basically grew up together, you
Yeah.
know. So let's talk about philosophy on parenting and how it might differ from our parents'
Yeah.
philosophy. What would you say yours is?
I think when I look back at parenting, you know, and our parents were raised by the greatest generation. So my grandfather was a Pearl Harbor vet. He was in Pearl Harbor when it happened. And they went through the Depression. They went through these things, our grandparents. So our parents were raised in this certain way. There was very like, you know, their parents were, you know, king of the household, really. You know, they set the rules. You follow the rules. You're a kid, you know, seen, not spoken to. Not that they were that harsh. They were very loving people, my grandparents. But, you know, it was more that kind of feeling. I think our parents, we had this generation of parents that probably for the first time were a lot of two-person working households. So that's why we were latchkeys. That's why we're the Latchkey Legends. Is
Right.
because our parents, to make ends work, to have a good middle-class lifestyle, our moms were working, our dads were working. We didn't really have a lot of social safety net. And I mean, there were rec centers, I'm sure, and stuff like that. But we didn't have, our kids weren't going to a different camp every week in the summer.
No, not
you know?
so much structure.
We weren't doing
Right.
anything. You know what we were doing? Michelle from down the street, who was like a sophomore in high school, was walking down for $3 an hour and playing gin rummy while we watched soap operas all day. That's what was happening in my middle school summers. You know, it wasn't like, oh, we're having experiences out here. We're doing this. We're becoming we're becoming like a trampoline artist, and then we're gonna go and make a movie this week, and then we're gonna go do this, which it's very cool, but it's just that was not the way, right? So our parents were basically like, yeah, you like be a good kid. I think of this all the time whenever you'd see a dog. And if one dog was yippy yappy or bit kids or did anything, that dog was a bad dog. And if you saw another dog that was a good dog, it was like you're a good dog or a bad dog. It wasn't like, maybe this dog is a rescue who's been through some stuff and he just needs to build trust. I think of our parenting style a lot like that. The difference is bad kid, good kid, bad dog, good dog. And a lot of like when we were growing up, it's like if kids were, you know, like when you're in middle school, you're in high school, you're pushing the boundaries a little. I was a square. I was a total square. But like kids were, you know, drinking a little, doing stuff. And those parents, it's like, oh, you got to stay away from the bad kids. Or you got to stay. I think we have a much different approach where we are. And there's good parts and bad parts, but I think we are much more with our kids like collaborative parenting. So we're much more like, why are you doing this behavior? How is, you know, like what is coming up for you that you are in so much distress right now? You know, I think that the challenge for us is that we're so hands-on with our kids that you don't want a helicopter parent. You want them to build in as they're getting older and they're about to be out on their own. The world's going to be, they're going to have to deal with things that they don't like. There's going to be, you know, issues where they're dating or something's happened and they're feeling unsafe in a situation, and are they going to be prepared? Are they going to know how to handle themselves and how to stick up for themselves? And so I think that's where we fall, is where a little bit through I'm especially seeing it through this college process and stuff now. I've got a kind of first child, rule follower, like she's on her, like she's doing it all herself, which is great, and we're there to support her. But it's like, you know, if they fall and they stumble and they're not totally ready, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like everything doesn't hinge on this competitive individualism type thing that we have in the US, where it's like achieve,
Right.
and the only way to get there is if you compete your way to the top.
Right.
It's like, no, let's just like let's just enjoy the individual and let them grow into who they are and what are they interested in.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I don't know. I just think our parents' generation was a little bit more like that kind of like, you know, top down type thing, and we're a little bit more collaborative with our kids.
I like that wording. I think collaboration is a good word, because it's that balance between being a tiger parent versus being a complete like free range parenting style.
Yeah. There were bad things about that too. We got really lucky. We survived it.
Yeah. You know? Yep.
This is the age when you didn't wear a bicycle helmet. You know, I remember my friend flying over and getting hit by a car.
I've seen it with my friends.
And you're like, oh my God, how did you live out of that? And maybe you were a little brain damaged.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe, yeah. So, where do you think we fell short as a generation? If we did at all,
I think
being
in an like we have the most intergenerational workforce that we've ever had. There's literally 4 to maybe even 5 generations in the workforce now. So I think there's a little something we could learn from the generation right below us, the millennials, which is that I think that we were, and I remember seeing it. So I've been out of corporate and been my own boss now for the past 9 years, but I was in corporate for an awful long time. And I remember when the millennials started coming in. Now, this is 10 years ago, so they were much younger. They were in their early mid-20s. And I remember all our managers, they obviously had taken training about how to support the millennials and what language to use and how to involve them in the training.
I remember seeing YouTube videos about this.
Yeah, they're like, okay, what's your idea? Because this other generation felt their ideas were so important. And I remember our market VP leading this meeting, and he had a certain personality. And I remember thinking, oh, this is not going to fly by him, because a younger, like 20-something, got up and had an idea about something, and he was speaking, you know. But you could see it in him that he had also had that training, and he was like, pull yourself back,
Yeah.
let them talk. But I think that one place that we fall a little bit short is we fall a little bit more into like that we were raised by the top down kind of idea, and it was that way in the business world or in the corporate world or in the world after college, so like the working world. So I remember being a young, in my 20s person, and I had a boss who did something that I thought was completely out of line and a little like on the harassment side of things. And I went to my dad and I called my father and I said, Dad, I am going to report this to HR. I can't believe this. I can't believe that this boss did this, and she's a woman, you know, and that she said these things. And he said, you can do that, but you're going to be blackballed, and it's going to be hard for you to find another job. And I took his advice instead of standing up for myself. Okay. And his advice was just like the fall in line. Don't be the squeaky wheel. You know. And I do think that that's all generational come down.
Yes.
And later, when we had this new generation coming up through the workforce, and I was working with them, that was one thing. On one hand, I was like, okay, you got to earn your stripes too, you know. But on the other hand, I was like, it is refreshing and nice that someone has confidence in themselves, that they feel comfortable asking for what they want at the beginning of their career. Right. Because I also look at so many women, you know, in my generation who they don't make as much as they could be making, or they don't have the level of rise in their career that they could have. And a lot of that comes from being being a good kid, being a good girl, and not, really being as forceful and out there like, hey, I've got an idea. I've got a thing. Like we're coming to now a little bit more in that era, but I'm saying like, in our late 20s, early 30s, in that part of our career, we were not socialized in that area of our career to be empowered in that way.
Yeah. You hit the nail on the head. And how I like to think about it is like, we were the generation of we're not going to take it and fight the power. But then at some point, we decided I would like to have a house and I'd like to have health insurance.
For sure.
So I need to play this game.
Because we didn't really have an option of a different game to play.
Right.
Really, because we have a system where it's like, I know for myself personally, like I came out of college, I worked for 4.5 years in the radio industry. I loved it, but then I really decided that I wanted to take a different path. I started a production company, so I started my own small business when I was almost 25 years old. And
You've always been a hustler, entrepreneur, huh?
I have. I've never worked for a base salary in my entire working life after college. Ever. I've always been in a commission job or self-employed.
Wow.
I've always made my own way. I'm scrappy.
You've always been this way then, huh?
I've always been this way.
Wow,
I'm
that's
scrappy.
amazing.
And so, but I, I lost my train of thought.
Oh, I'm sorry, I interrupted.
It's okay. I'm just trying to think.
I think so. I was talking about like how we were the generation of we're not going to take it anymore, fight the power, but we wanted to have.
I know where
things,
I was. We were talking about a home and health insurance.
Yes.
And so I was 29, 30, about to be 30, and we'd had our business for 5 years. I had it with my then boyfriend, now husband, and we were getting married. And insurance in Texas had really been in this place where it was like I was going to have to purchase a maternity rider. And so the option was one of us needs to work in a corporate job for the insurance. So I think in many ways it's just some of the systems that we have dictated things in a certain way for us. But
we didn't have, and what we didn't really think too much of, I don't think, as a collective, as a generation, is like, this system is grossly unjust. We need to fight for change.
Yeah. Well, I kind of felt that way. I mean, I think
we all kind of felt it, but we didn't act.
Yeah. Well, I had to say, it kind of depends on your motivation, right?
True.
So when I got back into corporate and left my business that I founded, like that I co-founded, and so that was a big deal for me, like going back into corporate. And, it was really like a push from from what I needed to do to have a house, to have these things, to start a family, versus what I would have naturally just continued or wanted to do. But I went back into radio. I liked radio. I loved marketing. And we were right on the edge of deciding to start a family. And so I looked at two industries, specifically knowing that there was a little bit of job sharing, which I had seen in my early career happening, where two people share a job. And I knew this was a possibility, and the people could still keep their health insurance, full health insurance, and they could make decent money still doing this, but work with a partner and work kind of in a part-time arrangement. And so I didn't know that I could do it 100%, but I knew there was a possibility in these industries, and I interviewed in those industries. And then when I got a job in one, I thought, if I work really hard, if I really prove myself, I can work myself into a job share.
Yeah.
And when I was ready to have my daughter, like, I was pregnant, I left, and I was able to navigate that when I came back, because I was so motivated.
Yeah.
I was so motivated that I went to my boss. I think when you have a really strong motivation, and it's interesting because we've been through a lot of really tough things here in the last decade, and this generation that's coming up, like my daughter's generation, we've got the millennials and we've got Gen Z.
Yeah.
And this generation coming up, they're much more forthright and what they deserve, like their basic human, just being a human, what they deserve, the kind of lives they deserve to have.
Yeah.
And they have a very, I think that they seem to have a very strong sense of like internal like justice. Like they stick up for other people.
Yeah.
They're not going to let somebody be bullied.
Right.
They've been kind of socialized in a different way through their schools and everything else to be a kind and caring neighbor. And I really do wish that we had more civics in school now, because maybe we're in a unique position in Austin, and maybe that's more of like our school district and our schools here.
Yeah.
But I think it's something completely to celebrate, is that, you know, everybody right now is feeling that they need community. They need community. We're the generation facing, as the Surgeon General put out the warning this last year, isolation and a loneliness epidemic. And we have technology and we have all these things, but like we're on the balance, and it could go one way or the other way. And it's like leaning into, you know, those things that we know as Gen Xers really helped us along the way, was hanging out with people, making friends,
absolutely,
being a friend. And you have to have friends, you got to know how to be a friend.
Exactly. And I think the stuff that you do, the stuff that I do, is perhaps an example to people. Like, you don't need to sit around and wait for things to happen. You can make things happen.
Yeah, you can make it happen.
Yeah. Self-empowerment. And, you know, and when things feel chaotic in the world, it's sometimes hard to remember that. Exactly.
Like, you have it inside. You just have to reach deep inside and believe that you can do it.
Before we sign off here, Melissa, give us a tip on how we can reach deep.
I think that one of the most important things right now for everybody, and definitely for our Latchkey Legends, is to be thinking about your own self-awareness and realizing, what is it that I'm feeling in this moment? What things are making me feel uneasy or nervous or fearful, or like, how is my body reacting? And thinking about, how do you regulate? What are the things you can do that really help you out? Is that taking a walk, going on a hike, walking the dog, being out with your kids, and then taking those steps that you know are going to help you feel better? I think that we can all go inside right now and like get strong inside by really being in touch with our center, our core, and also being a good neighbor. Being there for the people in your community, your neighbors, your friends at your school, at the kids' schools. You know, all that kind of stuff. Like, really checking in with people, really talking with people. And that's how you really realize, like, we have it, we've got it.
Yes. Thank you for that, because that is exactly what I'm trying to do over here.
Yeah.
Is reach out to people and just say, hey, I'm here, we're here, let's get together, let's do a podcast.
Yeah, it's amazing. And you know what? Gen X, we're the generation that gets forgotten. We're the smallest group, you know. We're the ones, we don't kick the dust up too much. We go with the flow, man. You know, that's so true. It's good that there's something just for us to go, hey, like, we're here for you at Austin Parks and Rec. You know, we're going to be talking to the Latchkey kiddos. That's
right. Well, if you'd like to hear more of Melissa's awesome strategies and advice on this work-life balance, you can look up WorkMuse on basically every major social media platform, and they can find you.
Sure. And we're workmuse.com if you're interested in learning about flexible work practices like job sharing and work-life balance. Check us out.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, thanks for asking me. I really am so honored that I'm your first guest. That means a lot.
Thank you. And thank you all for listening. We'll catch you next time.